Developed by the Counterterrorism Interagency Task Force, and ICAO is part of this UN committee. We are, in fact, 38 UN entities participating in that, and we have participated, of course, to the elaboration of this air passenger travel cycle. If we take the first phase, which is the pre-departure, of course, before taking the plane, you will need to have a travel document. But before issuing the travel document, you have to have a birth certificate. And then you have also to ensure that you have the right processes in issuing the document allowing you to travel and to control, of course, these processes. In addition, as it was shown this morning, it is, of course, if there is a need to ensure that you have the appropriate visa. Then you have the departure phase, and then when you are checking at the air carrier counter, you will give your advanced passenger information, and this is part of the interoperable applications. After that, at the arrival and during the flight, these information, passenger data exchange, will be transferred and forwarded to the right entity in charge of securing, of course, the arrival of all the passengers. And also in the last phase, you have also interoperable applications again, in order to check notably the name of the travel documents on certain watch lists. The regulatory framework behind the ICAO Trip strategy is, in fact, in Annex 9. The Chapter 3, more specifically of Annex 9, which is entry and departure of persons and their baggage. And these are really the main SARPs for the ICAO Trip strategy. And in fact, the Annex 9 facilitation is both allowing and to facilitate the clearance of passenger, aircraft, baggage, etc., but also to manage the challenges related to border security. And this cannot be achieved if there is not a coordination of all the agencies and entities involved in this process. So recently, the Amendment 26 to Annex 9 has been approved by the Council, and in fact, it became effective yesterday, 23 October 2017. The areas which have been covered by this Amendment 26 are machine-readable travel documents, automated border control, unaccompanied minors, passenger data exchange systems, and the passenger manifest. I will give you only some details about the SARPs which have changed for machine-readable travel documents, automated border control, and passenger data exchange. In the element of machine-readable travel documents, there is now a new recommended practice, the 3.9, which is incorporation of biometric data in MRTDs. There is also the replacement of the word passport with travel document in some SARPs. And finally, there is a new standard, the standard 3.35.1, which is related to the seizure of false documents. There are new recommended practices related to automated border control gates. You can see here from the slide that the number of ABCs has increased in the last years, and there is a new recommended practices asking states to consider introduction of ABC systems. There is also another recommended practice which indicates that states using ABCs should use the Pkd to validate the eMRTDs, to have biometric matching against the holder of documents, and also to query the Interpol SLTD database. What is new here with this Amendment 26 is, of course, the movement of standards from 3.48 to 3.49.2 into a new chapter, which is the Chapter 9. And this is the most important information here is, of course, what we have already discussed this morning, is the new standards requesting states to implement advanced passenger information system. Before moving to the next slide, I just want to mention that my colleague Juan Lamosa will give you some updates on the auditing of Annex 9 security-related SARPs, and more specifically on the SARPs which are touching the ICAO Trip strategy. We have developed, in order to help states and to assist states in implementing the TRIP strategy, we have developed an ICAO Trip Roadmap. This roadmap is available on the ICAO site, and you will have the opportunity to look at it more in detail. But what we are really advocating in this roadmap is the national coordination between all the agencies, but also the need for international cooperation with all the organizations involved outside the state. The action and step for all TRIP elements. First, we have sent recently a state letter asking states to nominate facilitation focal point. This is the first step. This focal point should be, in fact, in civil aviation authorities, and they will be in charge of dispatching the information to all the entities involved in TRIP in the state. As per today, we have received already 150 nominations of facilitation focal point, and I invite the states who have not yet nominated focal point to do it. The second obligation from state is, of course, to complete the electronic filing of differences on the compliance checklist for Annex 9 SARPs. And this, of course, it is an ongoing commitment from states in order for them to file differences if they are not in a position to implement standards. Finally, and this is very important, is to establish a national air transport facilitation programs and committees as per the standards 8.17, 8.18, and 8.19. Why it is so important? Because really it is the right place to coordinate at the state level all the activities related to the TRIP strategy. Our second speaker, Mr. Luis Ernesto Camilo Garcia, will give us notably an overview about how they have implemented their National Air Transport Facilitation Program in the Dominican Republic. The 5 elements of the TRIP strategy. We have here evidence of identity, MRTD, document issuance and control, inspection systems and tools, and interoperable application. I will give you some highlights for the steps to take for each of these elements. Let me start first by evidence of identity. There is a need for each state to establish a national strategy of authenticity of identity, application of the evidence of identity principles, and also the need to add security feature for the breeder document. This evidence of identity is really linked also to one of the UN Sustainable Development Goal, which is the 16.9, asking that by 2030, there is a need to provide legal identity to all. Regarding the MRTDs here, there is a need to ensure the completion of MRP's implementation. I just want to remind you that the deadline for that was 24 November 2015, and I invite the states who have not yet complied with this standard, the standard 3.11, to do it. There is a need also, when you are issuing MRTDs, to comply with specification on MRTDs contained in our Doc 9303. And finally, standard 3.12, to issue machine-readable convention travel documents. Sorry. The third element, document issuance and control. As per the standard 3.7, 3.8, and 3.8.1, there is a need to respect certain processes for document issuance and control. There is also a standard, the standard 3.10, to report stolen and lost travel document into the Interpol SLTD database. Let us move now to the fourth element, inspection systems and tools. There is a need to ensure secure reading and verification of the machine-readable travel document, to participate in the ICAO Public Key Directory, and my colleague Christiane DerMarkar will give you more information on that, and the recommendation to implement automated border controls. Finally, the last element, to check passports against the Interpol SLTD database, which is a recommended practice. To implement, of course, the Advanced Passenger Information System, and to follow the guidelines for passenger name record, which are the guidelines issued by ICAO. And finally, to link the name on the MRTD on the different watch lists, such as Al-Qaeda and Taliban. And all that, of course, cannot be secured if we don't have international cooperation, as it was mentioned by our Deputy Director this morning, Sylvain Lefoyer, between all international organizations involved, such as Interpol, IATA, IOM, and WCO. You have seen on your table since this morning that there is a trip strategy compendium who can give you more details about all what is related to the ICAO trip strategy. It has been developed in cooperation with several international organizations. And finally, I will close by reminding you that we will have a regional seminar in Jamaica from 28 to 30 November 2017. So thank you for your attention, and let me now introduce you our first speaker. My colleague, Juan Lamosa, is currently the chief of the Aviation Security Audit section in ICAO in the Air Transport Bureau, where he oversees the implementation of the ICAO Universal Security Audit Program, USAP. Prior to this position, Mr. Lamosa was the chief of the Implementation Support and Development Security section, overseeing all assistance and capacity building initiatives, including the development and implementation of aviation security improvement plans, the establishment of partnerships to coordinate and improve capacity building efforts, and providing support to regional aviation security programs. Before joining ICAO, Mr. Lamosa's aviation experience includes working as a Canadian Forces pilot and as a manager of aviation security training at the International Air Transport Association, IATA. It is now time for me to give the floor to Juan to provide an overview of the USAP. Juan.
Merci, Narjes. Good.
Thank you, Narjes.
It's my pleasure to be able to come to present information about our audit program. Given the subject of today's presentation, I'm going to get into a presentation that is more focused on what the program can provide as in terms of information. But first, we need to really talk about what the objective of the program is. Our objective is to promote global aviation security through the regular auditing and monitoring, or continuous auditing and monitoring of aviation security performance in our member states. But the question is, what does aviation security performance mean? Well, as Dr. Narjes Abdennebi just said, we also include the aviation security related standards of Annex 9, which is important for this particular forum. But more importantly, it's to understand that we're not assessing operational implementation in the sense that we are not testing systems. We are using our tools by observing, questioning, and reviewing documents to determine if all the pieces are in place in order to ensure that the system is working correctly. And with that in mind, this is what's really important to bring to this audience, is that we are using two graphs. One is determining the level of effective implementation of the critical elements in the aviation security oversight system. This system includes 8 critical elements, which I won't go into detail, but covers from the legislative framework to the policies, the responsibilities, the training, the guidance and procedures, the approvals and certifications, the actual quality control activities, and the physical implementation and ability to correct deficiencies when these are identified. Now, as I said, it's an oversight system, and we then look at all the different areas that are covered in aviation security. Of interest to this group would be the 9th area, which is the security aspects of facilitation. As was already presented a couple of minutes ago, and I'm sure this morning, these are the standards that we cover. We only cover standards as of now. However, with the newest amendment to Annex 9, which became effective yesterday, but will be applicable on 23 February 2018, we will start auditing those new standards only starting 23 February 2018. Of course, this brings a little bit of a dilemma because advanced passenger information was a recommended practice that we already looked at because there was a lot of interest in the international community to find out what the situation was with API. So, without getting into too much detail, I think the most important thing if we're looking at a roadmap is to talk about where we are today. In terms of program coordination, we have divided everything into protocol questions. So 44% of audited states have not established air transport facilitation programs based on Annex 9. So that shows us that we've got some work to go. 49% of the audits reveal that states have not established national air transport facilitation committees or airport facilitation committees or similar coordinating bodies. And it's important to note one of the things that we audit is not compliance to a specific letter of what it says on words. We're looking at the intent of the standard. So if you don't call it a national facilitation committee and there's another mechanism, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a national coordination mechanism and an airport level coordination mechanism so that the information is circulated and moves to the appropriate locations and all the people that need the information have the information and that the responsibilities are very clearly established. Moving on, over 90% of the audited states incorporate security features, have safeguards against theft of blank documents, and establish appropriate controls over the entire travel document application, adjudication, and issuance process. I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody in this room that it is an important process to make sure that blanks, that the virgin documents don't get misplaced and that there are controls. They're extremely valuable to people that want to do ill and falsify documents. And of course, that is part of the elements that we check during our audit process. Continuing about the security of travel documents, we look at various protocol questions that deal with the policies to report information about stolen, lost, and revoked travel documents issued by a state to Interpol. Approximately 80% of audited states have established a policy to report to Interpol, have designated an office or entity as responsible for reporting the information, and have developed guidelines for reporting this information. Over 80% of states audited also report stolen, lost, or revoked travel documents to Interpol for inclusion in the SLTD database. Of course, that means that there's around 20% of the states, and this is important to note that these are of the audited states. Of course, we have not audited 100% of all states, and we are moving towards that direction, but this is also based on the existing information that we have today. Security of travel documents. We have protocol questions, in this case, protocol question 9.025, that assesses whether passports in the state are machine readable in accordance with Doc 9303. Currently, over 95% of audited states are issuing machine-readable passports according to the standards that have been established. Of course, as Dr. Narjes said a couple of minutes ago, that means that there is still a small amount of room for improvement in this area as well. With regards to convention travel documents, approximately 25% of audited states issue these documents for refugees and stateless persons. Of those that issue, 90% are complying with Doc 9303 requirements. Furthermore, about 25% of audited states issue crew member certificates, and of these, two-thirds comply with Doc 9303, and 80% have adequate controls required for the issuance of these documents. And of course, these are not necessarily absolutely required, but if these are being implemented, then we have to assess their implementation. Moving on. Going on to the, I just realized I haven't been following along with my slides, and I apologize for that. That's the slide I just spoke about. Moving on to the inspection of travel documents. Over 90% of audited states require appropriate measures or procedures to be established to assist aircraft operators in the evaluation of travel documents presented by passengers in order to deter fraud or abuse. Only 68% of audited states ensure this requirement is being implemented. And this is something that we see often on the field, that some states, the aircraft operators in some states do have assistance in detecting fraudulent documents, but many times it doesn't come from the state they're in. It comes from foreign states that have embassies and programs to train on fraudulent document detection. In practice, necessary precautions are taken by aircraft operators at the point of embarkation in 70% of audited states to ensure that passengers are in possession of the prescribed documents for transit and destination. Of course, this refers also to visa requirements as well as passport requirements. With regards to inspection of travel documents, again, approximately 95% of audited states have established a requirement for their public authorities to seize fraudulent, falsified, or counterfeit travel documents, as well as the travel documents of a person impersonating the rightful holder of a travel document. Over 75% of audited states have also established a requirement for their public authorities to ensure that such travel documents are removed from circulation immediately and returned to the appropriate authorities of the state named as issuer or to the resident diplomatic mission of that state. And over 75% of the audited states implement these policies. With regard to entry and procedures and responsibility, approximately 60% of audited states have not introduced advanced passenger information under the national legislation. And of course, it becomes mandatory from the auditing perspective as of 23 February 2018, not 2108. We're looking a little bit further into the future, I think. So 2018. So as I said before, the auditing process starts by looking at the applicability date of the audit. Now, of course, these are all a lot of numbers for different standards. All the standards are covered in the compendium that Narjes talked about that was made available to everybody, all the standards that are being audited. As Narjes also said, the standard on API is moving to Chapter 9. And this has been updated in our audit methodology, so starting 23 February, we will be auditing to the new standards. We do, however, track back so that we don't lose the information that was related to the previous audit results under the old standard numbers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Juan. Of course, we have seen that there are good news, but also bad news. Good news, you have 90% of the audited states who have incorporated security features in the NRTD. And 80% of the audited states have established a policy to report to Interpol. The bad news is, of course, related to the low number of audited states who have developed a national air transport facilitation program, and we are hoping, of course, that this trend will be inversed in order to be able to implement effectively the ICAO Trip strategy. Now it's time for me to introduce our second speaker, Mr. Luis Ernesto Camilo Garcia. He has an extensive experience in the Dominican Republic public administration and legislator experience as representative of the province of Duarte to the National Congress of the Dominican Republic. He was appointed as General Director of the General Directorate of Passports from 2000 to 2003, and then he served as Director General of the Dominican Postal Institute from 2003 to 2004, giving the country its first postal code. From 2006 to 2010, he served as congressman representing Duarte province in the Dominican National Congress. He is the author of the books Passport in Times of Globalization and another one, Social and Legislative Memory. He was appointed by the President of the Dominican Republic, Mr. Danilo Medina Sanchez, as President of the Dominican Civil Aviation Board, position he currently holds. As President of the Dominican Civil Aviation Board, he also chairs the National Committee for the Facilitation of Air Transport, created as attached body of the Civil Aviation Board. And allow me to add that I have had the privilege to attend a meeting of the Facilitation Committee of the Dominican Republic, and I was really impressed by the high level of the discussion and the effective coordination which is happening there. My dear friend, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much to Narjes Abdennebi, and thank you to ICAO for giving this opportunity to the Dominican Republic to share with you our experience in the field of air transport facilitation. And we want to discuss with you our experiences in this field. I come from a small country which is enclaved down in the Caribbean region. As our national poet would say, it's in the same trajectory as the ground itself. And we live on an island. There's just 48,000 square kilometers of surface area, but we have some great natural resources and wonderful, very nice human beings. And in our region, we have become leaders in the field of tourism. In the whole of Latin America, we're the second or third country, in fact, after Chile and Mexico, who receive the most tourists as things stand. And this means from 1983 onwards, up until the year 2003, we grew to have 1.5 million tourists. And then from 2003, of the next 10 days, we added on another extra 1.5 million tourists coming in. And so we've had the same growth, 1.5 million more between 2013 and today. That's all these tourists coming into the Dominican Republic. And the trend for this year is that that we're going to grow another 80,000. So we're going to catch up again and grow another 1.5 million tourists coming in within the next 2 years. And so we've got a great flow of passengers coming into our island, where 80 to 90% of the tourists who come in by aircraft because of our geographical situation. So these are challenges with which we are confronted. And in our particular sector, we want to promote air transport policy, and we also head up the National Air Transport Facilitation Committee, which was created by the Presidential Decree 500 of the Dominican Republic. And so I have to promote air transport policy, but sometimes I wonder whether I'm there to promote air transport or tourism, because both of them are very intermingled. Given this, I have to take this opportunity to tell you that in my country, in Punta Cana, in the Dominican Republic, from the 1st to 3rd of November, we'll be having the 4th Air Transport Colloquium, which is being organized by the Latin American Civil Aviation Commission, ICAO, IATA, and it's also together with the Dominican Republic Civil Aviation Institute, and also with our permanent ambassador at the permanent mission here to the ICAO, Carlos Vera, our ambassador, who's here with us today and who represents the Dominican Republic mission together with others here this afternoon. Before I start my presentation, I know that now I only have 7 minutes, but I got 2 minutes back from Juan, my friend. We were recently evaluated about 2.5 months ago in the Dominican Republic, and for reasons of time, I'm not going to go into all of this. But it will be coming up in Jamaica. I'll be presenting our assessment that we voluntarily went through. And I will also touch on the USAP security audit of the Dominican Republic, because we're very small, but we're number 2 in Latin America, number 4 in the world. 97.8%. That was the audit results in the area of security and facilitation in the Dominican Republic. Because you have to be secure, but you need to also have facilitation, because we've got tourists coming in, and we don't want to bother them, even although, of course, security is extremely important. But that is why we always talk about the FAO committee, the facilitation committee, and the security committee. They go hand in hand. And we have a perfect marriage here with no divorce between the two annexes that deal with security and facilitation. But as I only have 5 minutes left, let's now get on with the presentation itself, which is over here. So we're going to go through this quickly. I'm going to share some points with you. We're going to share this presentation that we prepared to share with all of you. First of all, there's the National Air Transport Facilitation Program, which was set up, the National Air Transport Facilitation Committee, and which was approved by the whole of the Civil Aviation Board, so that it could be rolled out throughout the whole year. And we'll be looking at the implementation of the National Facilitation Program and progress that's been made with the accessibility criteria that we're going to share with you. And then thirdly, there's the USAP CME security audit. First of all, the facilitation division. This is already an operational division which carries out the daily running of the airports in the Dominican Republic. We have 7 international airports in our country, and 2 of them handle around 82% of the total flow of passengers. And we've got 3 others that deal with tourism with less than 5,000 passengers per year. And here we can see the inspection visits that we carry out. There's 4 visits to the airports with movement of above 500,000 passengers per year, and those that are below 500,000 passengers have 3 visits per year carried out by the FAL committee, where we deal with everything related to facilitation in each of these airports. And here you can see the distribution of the airports in the Dominican Republic, down in the south in Santo Domingo, the capital, and then in the east we've got 2, Romano and Punta Cana, and then up in the north we've got Puerto Plata, that's the Gregorio Luperón airport, and then we've got Samaná, and we also have the Pki airport up there. Here we can see the results of the airport inspections, improvements in signage, hygiene, lighting, air conditioning, parking lots, and other services. Also, optimization of the passenger entry and exit times through the airport in accordance with the standards and guidelines and recommendations 3.38 and 3.41 respectively in Annex 9 of the Convention. We're talking about 37.5 minutes for entry and exit times, apart from certain flights that come from the southern cone where there needs to be more inspections and reviews carried out. And we've also been improving the check-in screen times through the border control, customs, security, and also facilities for passengers with disabilities. And we're also setting up various parking spaces, ramps, wheelchairs, bathrooms, and elevators as well. Here we can see the various meetings that we've had of the FAL committees. There are 3 different entities. There's the National Facilitation Committee, which brings together migration, passport control, customs, and also the airport security, IDAP. All of these different institutions make up the FAL Committee. And then we've got the Facilitation Division from the Civil Aviation Board. And then after that, there's the FAL committees in the individual airports who are working in the daily work out in the field. Then we've got the inspections of the airport facilities on this slide. And you see all of the different results on the graph. I don't have time to go into all of that. And then here's some shots of the migration booths, the signage for what's happening with accessibility as well. And we're going to turn to that now. Progress made in terms of accessibility criteria. We are the first country, in fact, in Latin America that is implementing accessibility criteria within facilitation. And this is because of an agreement that was signed in January this year at the Tourism Trade Fair in Spain, together with people from PREDIF, which is the Spanish representative platform for the physically disabled. And they've become a reference in terms of accessibility in Europe and, in fact, in the rest of the world. And thanks to the signing of this agreement, our technicians went to Madrid and they came to the Dominican Republic, and we'll see how this process has been implemented. And we've been doing an awareness-raising campaign as well in terms of universal accessibility in the airports. And we've also had this awareness-raising campaign in the tourism sector as a whole, because there's no point in having accessible airports if the hotels for the tourists are not accessible. So how have we dealt with this? There's got legal aspects, there's human aspects, there's a question of compliance, mandatory compliance. Here we see how we go through the various different processes that people with disabilities represent. And here I would like to establish a link, because there's the human problem, there's problems with services, but there's also an economic aspect to this with countries. And here we see how many people have disabilities. How many are there? There's an important market niche here. We need to have airports that are accessible. If you've got people with disabilities, if they want to travel, when they go into internet, they try and check out which airports are actually accessible for them. And often they bring along various family members. It's not just the question of those who have disabilities, but those who are accompanying them. So this question of service and the human factor also turns into an economic factor for countries such as ours, where we're talking about 22% of our GDP being made up of tourism. We're almost talking about a quarter of our GDP being composed of tourism. It's not just the question of the tourism revenue, but the impact on the GDP and transport, the industry, road transport. Of course, air transport is included in all of this. There's lots of different knock-on effects. So this then becomes a very interesting subject. We're talking, in fact, about 15% of the world population that has some type of disability. So we're talking about 650 million people. That's the market niche who may have some type of disability, but we can explore this niche for our airports and also for countries who practice this universal accessibility approach in their airports and in their countries. And the percentage of people who are older than 60 years of age in the year 2000 came to 11%, and this will double and will reach 22% of the world population in 2050. So this will mean that there are 2 billion people and 2 billion opportunities to be seized by the tourism sector and the air transport sector. 70% of European citizens with some type of disability have the economic means to travel. Taking into account the fact that they tend to travel together with family members and friends, then this brings us to 58.11 million travelers. And 25% of people with reduced mobility invest more than 4,000 euros on an annual basis in travel. I'm giving you these data because obviously in the Dominican Republic we can't eat this cake alone. That's why we want to share all of this with you this afternoon. Potential revenue now for the tourism sector coming from the tourist segment, the tourists with disability from the European Union could lie between 88 and 126 billion euros per year. And if we just capture only 10% of this enormous potential market, then the income could rise to around 10 billion euros. And this potential tourism market for tourists with disabilities come from 3 main tourist-sending countries, namely Germany, the United Kingdom, and France, amounts to around 58 million tourists, including their companions. Just capturing 5% of the market of the Spanish tourism sector would bring in around 2.5 billion euros. Turning now to accessibility in airports. Let's look at Resolution 3920 of ICAO and also the Manual on Access to Air Transport by Persons with Disabilities, Document 9984. The Civil Aviation Board of the Dominican Republic's commitment to the community is, in fact, to ensure that airports operate and offer optimal accessible conditions, thereby avoiding segregation of any type of user. We have set up an accessibility and universal design unit within the Civil Aviation Board, which is focused on conducting research to develop proposals and maintain continuous innovation for the benefit of air transport users. There's the question of the long distances in terminals. I need to get back to the right slide there. And here we see the different phases of this project, so that I don't actually get killed off during this presentation. So we've got the phases of the project that was set up in Spain, which we saw in the last photo. There's a phase 1, awareness raising, training, and a pilot assessment of accessibility into airports. Of the different phases are here. As I've said, phase 1, that's what I mentioned already, awareness raising, first of all, with employees in the sector and in the airports and everyone involved there, to show them that you can meet accessibility criteria, but you have to talk also about strategies and breathe form into these, and you have to work on the psychological point of view. How should you deal with people with disabilities? Sometimes you want to give them a great deal of assistance, but sometimes they want to have accessibility so they can do things themselves. So our aim is to have a Braille, for example, to help them to be able to get around the airport. And we want to have a consistent approach. There's also the question of improving assistant services to travellers with reduced mobility and accessibility necessities. And then phase 3 is conducting the accessibility assessment. And this is coming up. And we think that in the next few days we'll be able to carry out this accessibility assessment as a result of this survey that we've carried out. Then phase 4, the implementation of the available technological services for all travellers, including Wi-Fi and also the NFC, Near Field Communications, which is this short-range wireless technology. And then let's look at the implementation, what's been completed and what is underway. We are in the middle of having delivery of this report that's being developed. And then there's other parts of the project that will be coming up in 2018. And then there's a question of the international audit, the ICAO audit. And thank you very much for your attention and for being so tolerant with the time that didn't actually belong to me. Time ticked away. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Luis Ernesto.
An example of good practices in terms of travel facilitation. I would like to add also that as ICAO is developing a guide for border control management, the Dominican Republic has been kind enough to receive our ICAO experts to share with them the good practices also in terms of border control in order for us to implement them into the guide. It is time now for me to introduce our last but not the least speaker, Mrs. Christiane DerMarkar, who holds a bachelor degree in business administration with a major in accounting from Concordia University in Montreal, and a professional designation as a Canadian Certified General Accountant. In 2000, after 6 years in the private sector, she joined ICAO, where she worked for 7 years in the budget section of the finance branch. For the past 10 years, she is now in the Air Transport Bureau, in charge of the ICAO Public Key Directory program, And in this function, she's the secretary of the Pkd board. For some of you, you have had the opportunity yesterday to follow the Pkd workshop. And for those who have not been able to attend this workshop, Christiane will be pleased to give you an update on the Pkd program. Christiane, the floor is yours.
Merci, Narjes.
Thank you, Narjes.
Everyone. So I know that afternoon coffee is a very important time for everyone, so we're going to try to make that as seamless and quick as possible. So today we talk about the Pkd. As presented quickly in the beginning by Dr. Abdennebi, so the ICAO Pkd falls under the facilitation program. It is one of the 3 interrelated pillars of facilitation, the 2 others being ICAO Trip and Annex 9. ICAO Pkd is grounded in the Trip strategy under the red element, inspection system and tool, being the tool that facilitates the sharing of the PKI information for the validation of e-passport at border control. In fact, validating the content of the chip. So speaking about the chip, that makes us right away in the connection of the Pkd. Pkd works with electronic passports. So an electronic passport has an additional security feature, a chip, which is like a mini computer, into which we write the information that is present on the data page of the passport holder, and we add, of course, the photograph. So the chip contains these elements, and in order to prevent the chip to be modified after personalized, so the chip is locked with a digital signature. These digital signatures are unique to every e-passport issuing state. So every state has its own digital signature. And when we cross border and the travel documents needs to be validated, the frontline entities would need to have access to the information, the PKI information or the public key that would validate the content of the chip. And this is what is the Pkd. So the Pkd is basically a database, a central repository that all e-passport issuing states input or upload the PKI information, their certificates, and from which border control entities from receiving states would download that information in order to validate the passports. So it is a central, it's a central repository that facilitates the sharing of the certificate while minimizing the volume of certificate being exchanged and ensuring that it's done in a timely manner. Well, sometimes a picture is easier to explain than simply words. As per document 9303, today some certificates need to be shared bilaterally. So you can see on the diagram with many lines, so the spaghetti one, the bilateral exchange. It's a solution, it's a method that could work for 8 to 10 states. But more than that, it is very difficult to share certificates using that method because it could be error-prone, not efficient, not timely. Whereas, on the other hand, making use of the Pkd basically gives the state a quick access. So by just one transaction, a state can upload their certificate to the Pkd, and within hours, this certificate could be available for download by other entities. So it is timely, it is organized, it's secure, multilateral platform that can be used by all states. So right away to the question, why you should join the Pkd? You have to keep in mind 3 perspectives. You have the issuer perspective, the border perspective, and the traveler perspective. And among you today, I am sure that you can be using as many hats as these. So you can be the issuing authority or the border control authority or simply a traveler. So from the issuer perspective, an e-passport has to be validated. So an issuer has to share as much certificate as possible so that when the citizen travels, the passport can be validated. An e-passport that cannot be validated at border control is treated exactly as a non-electronic passport. So it loses the additional security that was embedded into it. It loses that investment that was made to create such a good passport. It's treated as a non-electronic one, so it diminishes its value. From the border perspective, Pki validation, so the validation of the passport, gives trust and confidence that this passport has been issued by the right authority and has not been altered once it was personalized. So this is the frontline entity in your state, the one that allows all passengers coming in. So it is important that this validation is done. And as a traveler, me and you, what do we want from a journey? We want to reach safely the destination, go for a business, enjoy the time on touristic activities. We don't want to spend time in an airport. So having an e-passport would allow that seamless journey if the e-passport is validated and if the information that permits that validation is readily available at border control. Today, we are 59 participants. We just had a new participant a few days ago, and it's Panama who newly joined the Pkd. And as you can see on the map, there are still some states that are issuing e-passport that are not part of the Pkd. However, what is important to note while we are working on making these states join, 80% of the e-passports in circulation are issued by Pkd participant states. And that, I believe, was mentioned earlier in the introduction remark of Dr. Fang Liu, our Secretary General. So this is not negligible. 80% of the e-passport that could go through your border can be validated with certificates found in the Pkd. So Annex 9 and ICAO position is that we highly recommend to all member states issuing or intending to issue e-passport to join the Pkd, but also those states that do and implement checks and border control to join the Pkd. And as I heard from Dr. Abdennebi earlier, that they're going to also a new recommended practice related to ABCs. So this is an additional encouragement and motivation for states to join the Pkd. How to join the Pkd, here are the steps, and you can also find it on the public website. You can come and talk to me about it. These are the models that you can fill out. There are fees to join the Pkd. You have a joining fee of $15,900 and a recurrent annual fee of around $34,000, $33,000. It changes every year. It decreases every year. This is the important message. And also, you can come and ask me more questions about it, as I know that the time might be running. Once you join the Pkd, your first objective is to be active as soon as possible. Being in the Pkd and paying the fee without using it is also diminishing your investment. So you have to start active participation as soon as possible. And you are given normally 15 months to start and prepare for this active participation. This active participation starts the day you import your country signing certificate, authority certificate. So this is the highest level of certificate in your country, the root of trust from which all other certificates are signed. So this entails that a government representative would come to ICAO and hand deliver the first certificate, and we call that the CSCA key ceremony. So my last words would be that it's not complicated to be part of the Pkd, but you need to, in some cases, review your legislation. Some countries would need a political decision to join the Pkd. You need to establish since the beginning of the project for launching an e-passport, the responsibilities and the roles of the people that will be in charge of such project. Since the beginning, it has to be done. Also, you need to establish a budget line because the recurrence of the fee is coming every year. And sometimes, if you don't have a budget line, that will delay the payment process, and it could hinder your participation. You need to be conformant and compliant with ICAO technical standards since the beginning as well, since the issuance, starting issuing the e-passport, and which is an advantage, and we have seen it yesterday during the Pkd workshop, develop and implement a national Pkd and integrate it with the ICAO Pkd. So that will be very helpful for your border control. And as a conclusion, I will repeat the message that was endorsed by our last assembly last year, that ICAO encourages and urges all member states to be part of the Pkd, to use and to actively use the certificates to validate the e-passport at border control. And come and join us. Like, this is the most recent photo of the 24th Pkd board meeting that took place 2 weeks ago. It's a great forum. You can come, you can meet experts, you can meet other Pkd participants and share your experience and concerns and questions with them. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your question and meeting you during the next 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiane. I would like to make a kind of wrap-up of this session. First, just to remind you that the implementation of the TRIP strategy is not requiring more than the SARPs already existing in the Annex 9. So there are no additional requirements from states to effectively implement the TRIP strategy, except for implementing and being compliant with the Annex 9 SARPs. The first step, and I would like to really stress this point, is for every state to implement a national air transport facilitation program, as well as a national air transport facilitation committees, as it is mentioned in the standards of Annex 9. Finally, if we go through the Pkd issue, I would like to add the statistics that, unfortunately, although we have 59 participants, only 29 states are using the Pkd at their border, and we really would like to encourage all the states participating in the Pkd to use the Pkd actively. Finally, when a state is willing to implement e-passport, and I recall, as it was mentioned by our Secretary General this morning, implementing e-passport is not a standard. What is a standard is to implement machine-readable passports. But if a state is willing to implement e-passport, the state should consider also being part of the Pkd. And in fact, the investment in the Pkd is representing really very minimum investment compared to the implementation of the issuance of an e-passport. So we are now ready to take some questions from the Assembly.
I'm Nancy Graham, former director of ICAO's Air Navigation Bureau, and I'm back. I want you to know that I've dedicated this part of my career to bringing in aviation's newest entrants and helping them come into this aviation system that we love safely. So have you heard of Facebook? Have you heard of Amazon? Maybe you've heard of Google. That are floating cell towers. What about the new aircraft that are resuming operations for supersonics? All of those things are part of our aviation system that we have to take on board. And ICAO has a GANIS-SANIS, Global Air Navigation Industry Symposium, coming up this December, and you need to be there because you need to be ready. It's not tomorrow, it's today. Hope you make it.